If you are a fan of the Oscars, then you have most likely done this at some point. And of course, the internet is full of opinions on this topic. You can find different articles on traditional newspapers, movie magazines, blogs, forums, and YouTube. What stands out most for me when I read these overviews is that everyone has a different opinion on what actually counts as an upset. In most cases, these articles define upsets as wins you don't agree with or wins that may seem to be surprising because one or maybe more of the losers are better remembered today. I mean, yes, basically everyone agrees that Goodfellas and Martin Scorsese should have gotten it in 1990, but nobody back then would have considered Dances with Wolves an upset. And so these lists are often full of wins that were very obvious at their time. I mean, is this a joke? Yes, this must be a joke. Okay, now you're just messing with me. These articles are basically a combination of personally disliked Oscar choices, some obvious upsets that truly fit the definition, and wins that are somehow accepted as upsets from our modern perspective. Of course, it's easy to understand why these dynamics happen. If an Oscar winner becomes largely forgotten while their co-nominees remain a part of pop culture or cinema history, then it's very easy to say, wow, this must have been a big surprise. But Oscar voters do not make their choices by thinking which performance or which movie will have the longest legacy. Their decisions happen based on all the circumstances taking place at this moment. For example, today we would think that Vivien Leigh's victory for Gone with the Wind is the most obvious and easiest Oscar win ever, and she must have gotten that award in a landslide. But we need to look back at 1939 and 1940 to get the full picture, and this tells us, no, it wasn't like this at all. Bette Davis was the most prominent American actress at the time, and her performance in Dark Victory was hailed as the highlight of a career that already produced 2 Oscars. Many critics and editors picked her as the best performance of the year. Despite the popularity of Gone with the Wind, Bette won various polls among moviegoers as the best actress, and many outlets even felt disappointed by her loss, one stating that she lost by only 24 votes. I cannot confirm if this is correct, but from all that can be read, this was an extremely close race, and no matter how obvious Vivien's win is from today's point of view, it was anything but in 1940, and nobody would have been surprised if Bette Davis had won this race. And if that had happened, we would most likely call it a huge upset today.
I lost out to Dark Victory because that was the great Gone with the Wind year, and I was gone with the wind.
So in this video series, I want to take a look at past Oscar races that many consider an upset today and ask the question, was it really though?
Would you like me to explain?
I would love to hear this.
So would I.
If you know me, then you won't be surprised that we will take a look at 2 Best Actress winners first. There are 2 specific wins that very often pop up on the lists of biggest Oscar upsets: Judy Holliday and Grace Kelly. And in both cases, these upsets are always explained by their competition. How could Bette Davis, Anne Baxter and Gloria Swanson lose to Judy Holliday? And how could Grace Kelly triumph over Judy Garland? Now, before we go into the details of these races, I want to say right ahead that I only want to focus on the specific question, were their wins really upsets? I will not try to answer how they won and what reasons led to the losses of their co-nominees. No, I will only look at the coverage that these Oscar races generated and if people back then were truly caught by surprise.
Maybe I have a greater love for the truth, that's what he is. I'm a drunkard's wife, that's the truth too. And I think it's high time you stopped looking at everything as if it were a musical comedy and faced a little bit of it yourself.
To be frank, I find you slightly grotesque, Mrs. Elgin.
You came here to tell me something. What is it?
The winner is Judy Holliday.
When we talk about Judy Holliday in Born Yesterday, it feels almost impossible to not talk about Bette Davis and Gloria Swanson. Their losses have become so connected to Judy's performance that it often only seems to exist as a punchline like, what was the Academy thinking, and don't take the Oscars too seriously. Remember when Judy Holliday won over Gloria Swanson and Bette Davis? The staying power of these 2 dramatic performances, plus the unlikely choice as a dumb blonde character for Best Actress, has strongly shaped the public perception of this race today. And since so many are surprised by this Oscar win, it is by now considered an apparently huge upset that nobody saw coming and that shocked everyone who witnessed it. But was it? Looking at the press coverage leading up to the Oscars, one thing becomes clear very quickly. Judy Holliday's win did in no way come out of nowhere. Sure, the press did not declare her an overwhelming frontrunner, but she was considered to be a strong contender besides Betty and Gloria, in what was to be the closest category of the night. Even co-nominee Eleanor Parker agreed that one of them would be the winner that night, saying, "I can't quite decide who will win it. A few months ago I thought Gloria Swanson was a cinch. Now I'm not sure. Bette Davis might walk away with it, or Judy Holliday. It's a toss-up between those three." And this "one of those three will take it" attitude was also the dominant tone in all media outlets. Many editors themselves had trouble to pick their own favorite, but it's not the kind of story that is told so many times today. That you could somehow not decide between Betty and Anne or between Betty and Gloria, and therefore Judy Holliday somehow ended up as the winner.
Loser!
Just as an FYI, I personally think the whole vote splitting theory is nonsense. Instead, the media often had trouble deciding between Bette Davis and Judy Holliday or between Gloria Swanson and Judy Holliday. Basically, preferences were all over the place, but still divided pretty evenly. A modern comparison would most likely be the Best Actress race of 1990, when predictions were between Joanne Woodward in Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, Angelica Houston in The Grifters, and Cassie Bates in Misery. All of them considered a possibility, with Cassie winning in the end. Another article gives an interesting insight into the voting at the New York Film Critics that year. After the first ballot on the Best Actress of the Year, when Gloria Swanson received 2 votes, Bette Davis 7 and Judy Holliday 7, Gloria was eliminated and the race was between Miss Davis and Judy, with Betty nosing Judy out on the 6th ballot when she received 10 to Judy's 6 votes. So no vote splitting between Betty and Anne or Betty and Gloria. Instead, the New York Film Critics liked all 3 of them, dropped Gloria first, and then finally decided on Betty. In general, the tone in newspapers was, if sentiment is strong, watch out for Betty or Gloria, but Judy could win on the sheer strength of her performance alone. This quote basically sums it all up. Miss Swanson may very well nab the honors. As the aging film queen, she gives a striking if stylized performance. Her comeback is perhaps the greatest in film history, and she will snag the sentimental vote, which is considerable. Many of the Academy voters may plunk down for Miss Davis because of sentiment and because of her sheer artistry. Judy Holliday is pushing the 2 older stars for contention. She could walk away with the statuette. The perception of the race was also shaped by daily Variety. Between 1947 and 1957, the outlet annually conducted a poll among 15 to 20% of all Academy members and published the results before the show. Their predictions were usually 100% correct, and if their forecasts did not win in the end, it was considered to be a big surprise, maybe even an upset. This all began when Daily Variety predicted the winners for the year 1947. All categories ran accordingly that night. Gentleman's Agreement, Celeste Holm, Elia Kazan, Ronald Colman, and Edmund Gwenn. And Daily Variety also predicted that Rosalind Russell would very easily win Best Actress for Morning Becomes Electra. But the winner turned out to be Loretta Young for The Farmer's Daughter, which has since then gone down in history as another big upset. But overall, the polls by Daily Variety were very accurate and therefore not only predicted the winners, but also the upsets if somebody else took it. And what Best Actress winner did Daily Variety pick for 1950? To be fair, Daily Variety also said that the race was very close, virtually tied, but with a slight favor for Judy nonetheless. Again, you can come up with all kinds of reasons for this win. That young Hollywood preferred a newcomer over 2 veterans, that someone somehow split the vote with somebody else, that Hollywood wanted to invest in its future with a new star, or maybe that voters just prefer Judy's performance. But this is not the point of this debate. The thing is, if you think her win is deserved or not, it was always considered a strong possibility. Therefore, was this really an upset?
Grace Kelly for the country girl.
4 years after Judy Holliday, another actress triumphed at the Oscars and created a similar, never-ending controversy. Grace Kelly's win over Judy Garland in A Star Is Born is maybe the most infamous occurrence in the history of the Best Actress category, as Judy's performance today looms so much larger, not only over Grace's forgotten work, but basically every other nominee as well. If Grace had won her Oscar for Rear Window, maybe Oscar watchers would be more forgiving, but instead she won it for her dramatic role in The Country Girl, which next to Green Fire might be the most forgotten of her movies and performances. So a big upset seems to be the only logical answer here, right? Let's find out. This scene from the TV movie Life with Judy Garland, Me and My Shadows seems to sum up today's perspective on this specific race the best.
Oh, I'm scared to death. I've asked Sid to bet on Jane Wyman so he doesn't jinx it.
If Wyman wins, I'll eat my hat. Hell, I'll even eat Hedda Hopper's hat. Oh, sorry.
Careful, honey. I think they'll give it to Audrey Hepburn. I mean, I know
She
it.
just got one. I'll never give it to Dandridge, not in this town. Not yet. And Kelly, poor dear. Just say she was miscast. That leaves you, darling. Everybody says so.
Obviously, I understand the context of the scene. Why would Judy Garland's friends not tell her that she would definitely win? But the viewers of the movie surely have no clear insight into the actual surroundings of this race and are not aware of all that was going on in 1955. So they can only accept the movie statement that Grace Kelly's win came out of nowhere and that Judy Garland was the overwhelming frontrunner, as most Oscar watchers today do as well. But was she really?
I want to see the review in the morning paper first.
You can see it at breakfast. You need sleep.
Can't sleep until I know what they thought of me.
Considering that Grace Kelly was most likely the biggest female star in the world in 1955, it's not surprising that the press coverage before the Oscars talked about her performance as well as her chances for the award in detail. Both Judy Garland and Grace Kelly praised each other's work and avoided any competition. But the race between the two of them was the major topic surrounding the 1955 Academy Awards. The tone of the coverage was mostly newcomer versus veteran and Eastern socialite versus Hollywood trooper, a study in contrasts and even a class struggle. And obviously this makes sense. This race had everything the press could ask for. An actress who had been in show business since she was a kid and delivered one of the most celebrated comebacks in movie history. And a new star who took Hollywood by storm and surprised everyone with the seriousness of her craft. And both of them adored by millions. So you could say that the press tried to stir up drama where actually there was none. That Judy was the clear frontrunner and Grace only mentioned to sell extra papers. But this is not true. Grace Kelly was in fact seen as a strong contender for the win all the time. This was never a case of signed, sealed and delivered for Judy Garland, where she was way in front of everyone else. Instead, this was a classic race between two actresses with equal chances, like we have seen countless times. It was a Frances McDormand versus Brenda Blesson, Hilary Swank versus Annette Bening, Nicole Kidman versus Renee Zellweger, Meryl Streep versus Viola Davis. All cases where two possible outcomes were always accepted, and neither would have been surprising. And it's important to note that the race in '55 was not considered close merely because of Grace Kelly's popularity, but because of her performance in The Country Girl. This might seem surprising as Grace's performance is generally so unknown today and often seen as an example of melodramatic movie acting from this era, but in 1955 the enthusiasm for her work was very high and the idea of the most famous actress in the world deglamming herself for the sake of her art was still new and exciting. Remember the Daily Variety poll that correctly predicted a win for Judy Holliday? Guess who they predicted for Best Actress this time? Again, similar to Judy Holliday, Daily Variety noted how close the race was and that, even if Grace Kelly seemed to be the favorite, Judy Garland still stood a very good chance. But despite the raves for Judy Garland, a possible win for her was always connected to a tone of "if the Academy feels sentimental." A win for Grace Kelly, on the other hand, was rather seen as possible simply on the base of merit, as this summary of the Oscars sums up best. The honest weighing of role for role, performance for performance, placed the well-deserved Oscar in Miss Kelly's skillful hands. And even Best Actor winner Marlon Brando said, "The sentiment was strong on behalf of Judy. In view of the fact Grace won, sentiment was not involved." So no matter what many might think today, Grace Kelly's win was actually seen as neither surprising nor undeserving, but rather as a sign that the Academy only voted based on what was presented on the screen. But of course, Judy did not only have sentiment in her corner, but a highly praised performance that generated a lot of passion and had many reviewers and Oscar predictors searching for new superlatives, stating that she was clearly in a league of her own. But nonetheless, nobody assumed that she would get this Oscar easily. In a way, it was a case of will win, should win. Many were in Judy's corner, but nobody was blind to what was going on. A very close race that might easily go in both directions. It's a well-known urban legend that Hedda Hopper apparently had some insight into the voting and stated that Judy only lost to Grace by 7 votes. On the other hand, another columnist in 1955 wrote that he too had insider information and that Grace actually won by a landslide. Both stories are obviously nonsense, as neither could have information on the actual voting results, but it shows how the perception of the race was all over the place. One thing that cannot be denied, however, is that this Oscar outcome was a disappointment for many. Other actors and Hollywood insiders who had followed Judy's career for so long were certainly rooting for her, and her loss generated a lot of coverage after the Oscars. But why not? The newspapers had benefited from all the drama before, why not do it again afterwards? The story of Judy Garland, having just given birth to a son and then losing the Oscar, has all the ingredients for a great story, and news outlets want to sell papers. That's why the fact that NBC sent a camera crew to Judy Garland's hospital room to film her reaction to her win is also no proof that she was the overwhelming favorite in her category. Rather, she was a co-favorite, and it certainly didn't hurt NBC to try. If Judy loses, then the crew can just go home. As it did very unceremoniously.
And they said, they opened the envelope, you know, that airmail envelope, whatever they get. Opened it up, and he said, Grace Kelly, and I went, what? Well, they tore down the tower, the people jumped over, they ripped out this thing under here, and the 3 televisions said, nobody said goodnight even, they were so mad. They were so mad at me.
But if she had won, it would have made a great TV moment. So NBC was taking a chance that didn't pay off. But it doesn't mean that Judy's win was 100% in the bag. After her Oscar loss, the LA Times called Judy Garland a pre-awards favorite. And this makes sense if you apply the term to the time before the beginning of the overall award season and not just the Oscars. Grace did, after all, not only triumph that night, but began to take attention away from Judy's apparently easy win very early in the race. Judy's loss at the New York Film Critics was seen by many as the primary shift in the competition, where Grace won the Best Actress award with 9 votes compared to 1 vote for Judy. Even Eva Marie Saint did better with 2 votes for On the Waterfront. To be fair, Grace won her award not only for The Country Girl, but for her other performances in 1954 as well, but it just shows the overall presence and power that Grace Kelly actually had this year, and that not everybody was on Judy's side. Judy's performance was maybe better received by audiences, polls among movie fans generally favored her performance, but the public obviously does not vote for the Oscars. And simply going by Oscar statistics, Grace had many further advantages. The Country Girl was clearly preferred as a movie by the Academy. It was the typical prestige drama of the day, based on a respected Broadway play, and received nominations in all major categories, winning Best Screenplay besides Best Actress, while A Star is Born failed to get any major Oscar nominations besides Actor and Actress. Again, this falls more into the question of why, and you can argue that Grace won because she had a bigger year, because Hollywood, like with Judy Holliday, wanted to invest in its future, or because of Judy Garland's bad reputation until the end of time. But was this really a case of,
that leaves you, darling. Everybody says so.
No. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments on these famous or infamous Oscar races, please let me know below or on Twitter.